Hey guys, welcome back to Will's Garage. What I've got on my bench here today is a cylinder head from, it's either a 99 or a 2000 Volkswagen Beetle. This is a 2-liter motor. I actually purchased the car for an incredibly low amount of money because it has two bent valves. So the guy I got it from had just put a timing belt on this thing. He went to go get, as I'm told, a drink of water. Left the car running. When he came back into his garage, the car was no longer running. Apparently the tensioner wasn't tightened all the way. The belt kind of just fell off and it jumped time. Even at idle, it was enough that it bent two exhaust valves. So I pulled the head off, as you can see. And at this stage, I had just taken the cylinder head apart. I took the camshaft out, all the lifters, the valve springs, and the valves, because I'm going to replace all the valves, intake and exhaust on this thing, just to be on the safe side. I figured I'd make a quick little video for anyone out there that's looking for the basic steps of how to rebuild this cylinder head. So before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know every time I post a new video. So as you can see here, cylinder head's still pretty dirty. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the ports, clean the guides out so I can get ready to lap in some new valves. Here is a look at the new valves next to the old ones, and then all the stuff that I'm going to reuse, all in order so I can put it back in the same, like for instance put the lifters back into the same bores that they came out of, and they're sort of matched in wear to the camshaft. Springs don't really matter so much, same with the keepers and the top retaining plates. The cam upper bearing caps are numbered, so those are pretty straightforward, but just wanted to show you guys the basic parts here. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the cylinder head. I'll probably clean up the main gasket surface right away, clean out the ports a little bit and the guides especially, because we're going to be putting the new valves into there, and I'm going to be lapping these, so they are going to be spinning in the guides, and the last thing I want to do is scratch up a guide. And we'll take it from there. Okay guys, so what I have here is Clover compound. This one's Loctite. This is just a really old can. This is what I'm going to use to lap in the new valves to the old seats. Shouldn't really need anything crazier than this, even though I had two bent exhaust valves. The seats themselves look fine. There's no damage to the seat. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush a little bit of this onto the seat of the valve. I might actually put it on the cylinder head first. Then I'm going to put oil on the shaft of the new valve. I'm going to drop it into the ports where they're going to stay in. For instance, this exhaust valve will stay in here, intake, exhaust, etc. So when I take these out to clean, I want to put them back in the cylinder port or intake port where they came out of, because I'm literally cutting this seat in to match this seat. So these are going to become a matched pair. So I've got a little acid brush here. I'm going to open my can. This stuff does get kind of separated. I don't know if you guys can see in the picture, but you know, it has like an oil in it. That's what makes it fluid. But it's got some kind of silica carbide in it, and you don't need a lot of this. A little bit goes a long way. But I'm just gonna brush it around on the seats. Doesn't matter if you're a little sloppy with it, because when I'm done, I'm going to wash the cylinder head all out in my parts cleaner. The only thing you want to watch out for is to not get this into the valve guide. You get it in the valve guide, you're going to be cutting the valve guide, and then you run into issues of you know, scoring a line through the valve guide where you can actually pull oil into the cylinder, or into the exhaust for that matter, when the engine's running under vacuum, and then you'll get a nice cloud of blue smoke behind the car and not really understand why. Alright, real quick before I start, I wanted to show you guys what the seats look like now. It's not really showing up well in the camera. Hopefully you can see this. You kind of see some of the hammer marks from the valve being in there. You know, just basic wear, all the particles and stuff that run through the engine. So I just wanted to show you that before I started lapping the valves. Okay, here's my lapping tool. It's nothing more than a wooden stick with suction cups on the end, and there's different sizes depending on the size of the valve that you're working on. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So the way this works is stick it on the valve and just rub back and forth. Slight pressure down, up, then back down. And sometimes some of the lapping compound gets caught in the valve and on the suction cup. Just clean it off, stick it back on. Now, it's a little tedious, but you can kind of hear how it's cutting, and when the sound starts to go from a to a, you know, a little lighter sound. I don't know if you guys can hear it. Just pick up on it. Kind of drops a little more compound into where you need it. And depending on the severity of your valve seats, you might not need to do this very long, very far. So after a little while doing it, take a rag, wipe the valve seat, all the compound off. Let's see if I can show this on camera. So you see that grayish dull finish there? What you want to see is a nice even finish all the way around the valve. And you should see the same finish on the seat. So I'm going to wipe the seat up here. Okay, as you can see, the same gray finish. On this one, it looks like I need to go a little further here. You can see some of the pitting there. You know, if the pitting's too bad, you're going to have the valve seats cut. But this seems small enough that I should be able to get this out with just some lapping compound. You know, so you want to cut the seat a little bit with your lapping compound, pull it out, wipe the seat, see how you're doing. You're not really going to cut it too far. doing it by hand like this, but just take your time. Again, try not to get it in the valve guide. Keep those lubricated with oil, and just keep going back and forth on all the valves until they're all seated. Once you have them all lapped in, mark the valves, Sharpie something so you know where they go, and then wash the cylinder head really well. All the valves, everything. You want to get all that lapping compound out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lap all these valves, and then I'll touch base back with you when I'm done. Okay guys, so I've got a nice clean cylinder head here. Like I said, I washed it all out in a hot tank. You can see all those seats, nice silver, uniform. You know, there still is a little bit of pitting on some of those. You know, this is not a high performing vehicle, as some would say. This is a Volkswagen 2-liter in a Beetle. So, you know, I'm not looking for perfection here. I'm just looking for some good sealing. And you know, truth be told, this little bit here, you could try to lap it all out, and you know, chances are it will come out, but the valves are still going to seat in there just fine, because you know, as the engine's running, the valve is spinning a little bit, and it's, you know, cutting into the seat a little bit. So with that being said, I've got my new valves here all cleaned up in the same order that I took them out of the cylinder head. So I'm going to coat the stems with some oil. I'm going to drop them into the cylinder head. I'm going to clean up my springs, my lifters, get all that stuff ready to go back in as well. And then I'll show you the tool I use to take these out, and the tool I use to put these back in. Okay, so this is the tool that I use to get the old valves out. This part I never really use. This part is the useful part, and what it is it has a little magnet on this end. You put it on top of the spring. The valve stem goes through here, and you just give this a good whack with a hammer, and what it does is it pushes the spring down quick, and then the keepers get caught in the magnet. So the spring comes up, you can then remove the valve, and it just makes removing these pretty easy. The only limitation though is its diameter here. It is a little big, so it doesn't really work for, you know, the 1.8 liters or the newer 2 liters with multiple valves per cylinder. That you kind of have to use a regular spring compressor. But for this and just about any American vehicle, these work pretty well to get the valves out. Now this guy, this is what I'm going to use to put the new valves and the springs all back together. It's got 2 different size spring cups here, and the way this works is put the valve itself against this. You can tighten it down, and then just push that lever down, pushes your spring down, and then through the windows here you can get the keepers in to the valve stem itself, release it, and that should be it. Everything should be in place. This works for both removal and installation. You can rent these at a lot of the auto parts stores. This one I finally broke down and purchased because I used it quite often. What is this? This is an OTC part number 4572. But it's so universal, it works on just about any type of cylinder head, as long as you have the room to get to the valves. Okay, before I change or install the valves, I'm going to replace the valve seals. As you can see here, see if we can focus. That's a valve seal. It's got a little metal around the edge and some kind of, I'm going to say it's Viton or something along those lines, with a little metal spring around there to keep the oil from being pulled in when the engine's running. So since I have it all apart, I'm going to go ahead and just replace them all right away. You sit down in here underneath the lifter boards. I'm just going to use a regular pair of pliers to pull them out, but you got to be real careful when you're in there trying to pull them out. You don't want to nick the little machined area where the lifter slides, so you're going to get a lifter that gets stuck or have lubrication issues. So just be careful when you're going in there to take them out. Doesn't really matter if you damage the seal at this point, but when you go to put the new ones in, you have to be careful. There it is, out. Put the new ones in though. I'm just going to use a socket. This is the 10mm. It fits over the spring perfectly. That way I'm pushing on just the metal portion. Use a little extension here. And it doesn't take much to push these things onto place. Probably even use a little hammer so just to put these down where they belong. Make sure they're seated all the way and straight. But that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull all these other seals out right away and start installing the new ones. Okay, I'm going to put a little oil on all the guides. As well as on the stem of the valve. Now these are new valves, but you want to make sure if you're reusing them, there's no burrs on the tops where the keepers are. Because again, you don't want those scraping the guides, and you don't want it tearing the new seal. So when you put these in, just be gentle, make sure they seat in nice and smooth. Alright, I don't know how well that showed up on camera. I'll try to get a closer shot of doing this one. But pretty much the tricky part is to try to get the keepers here lined up and into the right grooves on the valves when the spring compressor is holding that spring down. I use a combination of little screwdrivers, some small needle nose, pretty much whatever works to get those things into place. And then, you know, as you release the tension, the upper retainer here and the keepers will lock into the valve and it'll stay into place. So let me see if I can set up the camera so you can see it a little better up close. Okay, I'm going to try to show you guys. Use these little needle nose and how to get the keepers into the lifter bore and onto the valve itself. I should probably point out, if you could see, the shape of the keeper is tapered and has those little rounded portions on the inside. That's what's actually going to bite onto the part of the valve there. So make sure you put it in with the taper, the narrow part of the taper going down. And like I said, I kind of use a combination of this needle nose and a small screwdriver, and just try to get it positioned in there. Definitely need patience for this. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll try to move the camera position here. It's not really showing well. Hold on, let's get some light on here. Alright, as you can see, those keepers are on either side of the valve there. You can see it's still kind of split open, but they're sitting against the valve. That's ideal. And then when I release the tool, those keepers are going to stay attached to the valve there. The spring and the outer retainer will come up. We'll bite everything together, and that valve will be installed. So here we go. Let's release it. And there it is. Shine the light on again. Now you can see the valve is where it's supposed to be. The keepers are nice and even. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to finish installing these other 6 valves here. And when I come back, I'll show you guys the next step. Okay, there it is, all 8 valves, springs, keepers, retainers, everybody is in place where they came out. Everything's seated nicely. You can check on the underside there. Make sure everybody is seated nicely in their seat. Nothing is sticking up or anything. So from here we're going to put in the lifters. They don't need to be pumped up with oil, though it is a good idea to put either assembly lube or motor oil on the lifter bore and on the lifter itself before you put it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to right away lubricate the bearing journal for the camshaft, as well as replace the cam seal on the front of the camshaft. So I'm going to clean up the camshaft, clean up the upper caps, clean up the lifters a little bit, oil everything up, and put it together. Okay, there's everything into place. Cam is just sitting on top right now. The reason for that is the #1 bearing cap, which also retains the front seal. Volkswagen calls for a special sealant that goes underneath this bearing cap to keep the oil from weeping out of the front here. You don't want to use silicone or any kind of regular sealant. This is, as I believe, an aerobic sealant. It's very thin, so that it won't interfere with the bearing clearances. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on here, install the camshaft caps, all of them, and then I'm going to try to position the camshaft to top dead center position, or as close as that as I can, and then I'm going to evenly tighten down all the bearing caps so the camshaft is down, you know, not necessarily tight, but down evenly. You don't want to tighten one before the other because it is opening some valves and others are not, and you could actually break the camshaft if you tighten it down one side before the other. You'll damage the bearing journals. So once I get the caps on, tighten it down nice and evenly, and then I'll go over the torque spec. Make sure when you put the bearing caps on, besides the numbered order, these are all stamped from the factory. you put them back on the same way as they came off. The bearing caps, the machine for the camshaft is actually offset. So if you put these on backwards, you're going to break the camshaft bearing caps. So make sure you put them back on the same way as they came off. The other thing I want to point out is, as you can see, these two lobes here are pointing down. So as I tighten down the camshaft, it's going to be opening these two valves. So besides making sure there's nothing underneath for the valve to hit, you want to tighten these down evenly. If you just went and say tighten down bearing cap 1 or 5, you're going to cock the camshaft in there and you can potentially break the camshaft itself. So I'm going to tighten down bearing caps 2 and 4, probably do 2 turns each in like a crisscross pattern, and then I'll go back and I'll tighten down 1, 3, and 5 and make sure the camshaft is seated all the way down. Once I have all these seated to the cylinder head, everything's nice and even, the camshaft moves nicely, I'm going to tighten down all the bearing cap nuts to 15 foot-pounds. I saw some people recommended 7 then 15, but Volkswagen on the service manual it says just 15 foot-pounds. So I'm going to do all that and then check back with everything. There it is, camshaft all tightened down and torqued to 15 foot-pounds. I'm going to leave off the front sprocket for now, if I can get it off, but until I have the cylinder head installed back on the car, because this is going back on the car. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, just make sure the caps 2 and 4 are run down nice and evenly. It brings the camshaft down nice. Then tighten down 1, 3, and 5, and then finally torque everything down to 15 foot-pounds. But that's pretty much it. Okay guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Volkswagen 2-liter ABA cylinder head. Just, you know, how to replace the valves, seat in the valves, reinstall the camshaft, pretty basic stuff. You can also do a lot of this procedure for just about any cylinder head that you have to replace the valves in. It's pretty much the same thing when you're just slapping in new valves. Again, you want to keep everything clean. Watch those valve guides. You don't want to damage the valve guides and or the seals when you're putting in the new valves. Like I said, keep an eye on the top of the valve where the keepers go, because a lot of times you develop a little bit of a burr. Just take a small fine file and just file off those burrs before you install everything. But that's pretty much it. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. That way you know every time I post a new video. And leave me a comment below. Alright, see you next time.